Shotgun with Charlie.
Riding shotgun refers to the practice of sitting next to the driver in a moving vehicle. The term riding shotgun came around after the time of the stagecoach, when somebody used to sit next to the driver holding a shotgun, in case they ran into bandits. My name is Charlie Cook, and I drive a lot. I like to talk to people while I'm driving, so I interview people in my car while I'm driving. Welcome to Riding Shotgun with Charlie. All right, before we start today's Riding Shotgun with Charlie, I want to tell you that you can get some Riding Shotgun patches and some Riding Shotgun and Gungram stickers on the ridingshotgunwithcharlie.com swag and merch page on the website. And if you'd like to help the show and support the show, you can buy shirts and hoodies and mugs at the, oh my God, I never remember the address. It's ridingshotgunwithcharlie.creator-spring.com, which is a mouthful, and I'll put a link below in the descriptions. But if you'd like to help support the show, all of the money there goes to getting the stagecoach across America. And you can send me pictures with you when you get these guys. Send me pictures of them, because I'm a little bit of a social media guru, not guru, tramp. Whore might be a good word for it. I don't know. Anyway, today we are welcome to this episode of Riding Shotgun with Charlie. Today we are in Livingston, New Jersey. Is this right?
This is Livingston, New Jersey.
We're in Livingston, New Jersey with attorney Daniel Schmutter. Dan, oops, hold on.
Oh.
We got to do some Lead Slingers hand sanitizer. This is really watery. It's really watery.
That is really watery.
It is really, it is really watery.
The second most watery hand sanitizer I've ever seen.
The second most?
No, yes.
What's the first most?
You don't want to know.
Is it from Mexico?
I won't say.
All right. So, Dan, thanks for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Before we start the show and kick things off, I do want to say thanks to John Petrolino of Decoding Firearms. He's written a book called Decoding Firearms, and he writes for Ammoland, for Bearing Arms, and for JM4 Tactical. And he was the gentleman that put Dan and I in touch so we could make this show happen. So we're going to put a link to Decoding Firearms. You should check it out because it's a great book. All right, let's go, shall we? We're going at the same time this guy is. So the game plan is we just leave the parking lot and just take a bunch of rights, and we'll end up right where we're at?
I think that's right. That's all we have to do.
That sounds pretty simple.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to cut in front of this guy. All right, so Dan, you're an attorney in New Jersey. As I was saying before we started the show, I used to hear you all the time on the Gun for Hire podcast.
I think you can't turn the right way out of there. You need to go that way, because we want to go that way. So.
All right.
I think we're good.
So I have no idea where we're at, except the Livingston Mall.
Yes. So what you'll do is you'll go out the exit there, go to that light, and then make a right. No, you want to go that way.
That way.
So we're going to at that light, you make a right, and it's just rights after that. So
all right. Easy enough.
It's a piece of cake.
Easy enough. Can we get out that way?
Because you know, in New Jersey, there's no such thing as a left turn.
This is what I've discovered with New Jersey guys. Everything's the jug handle.
Yes.
And
people from out of state think it's the strangest thing they've ever seen. People from in-state think it's the strangest thing they've ever seen.
It is the strangest thing. It really is. Yeah, the jug handles. It's a little crazy. I had John Petrolino on and Alexander Roubian, and we were talking about jug handles. Yeah. This is ridiculous. You can take a right to take a left.
Exactly.
This is nuts. All right, so you're an attorney. You do a lot of gun cases.
Yes.
How did you get into gun stuff? How did you become a gun guy?
It's funny because I grew up in the Bronx, New York. You know, so deep in the heart of New York City. My background was completely nothing to do with guns. My upbringing was very, very far to the left, in the heart of New York City. You know, my familiarity with guns was TV and the news. You know,
right.
Like so many people's experience with firearms is limited to.
And that's all dependable.
Yeah. Right. But I went to law school at the University of Virginia, and so I found myself in the South, and I'd never shot firearms before. And my roommate said, "Hey, you know, the UVA Rifle and Pistol Club is having a short course where they're going to teach people to shoot. Let's go learn to shoot."
Mm-hmm.
guns. Let's go shoot.
Yeah, what the hell?
And we had a great time. We learned to shoot. We were shooting. This is that squad was a competitive college competitive team. So they shot. I learned to shoot a rifle on a competition rifle.
Oh, cool!
One of those fancy, I think, Unschutz rifles.
Nice. Those are really expensive.
And we learned to shoot pistols on Ruger Mark II, I think it was. And it was a lot of fun. And I became a New Jersey gun owner in 1993. Anybody from New Jersey watching this knows what that means. Being a New Jersey gun owner. And that was it as far as my involvement with firearms. I was a gun owner at that point. And then right around 2002, the New Jersey smart gun bill was moving through the legislature. Yeah. And I decided to write an op-ed in the Star-Ledger, which is New Jersey's largest newspaper. Yeah. And I wrote an op-ed on how ridiculous the smart gun bill was and why it not only didn't make sense for all sorts of reasons. It ran, and I get a phone call from Scott Bach, who's currently the executive director of the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs, ANJRPC, which is the New Jersey State Association for NRA. At the time, I believe he was executive vice president back in 2002, if I recall correctly. And he calls me and he says, I saw your article in the Star-Ledger. I really liked it. I thought it was really well written. And why don't I know you? So literally that's what he said. And so that was the start. That's how I met Scott, and that really was the beginning of my introduction to the gun rights movement. And it wasn't until 2000, I'm going to say around 2003, 2004, that I actually got involved in Second Amendment law. There was a case, this was well before Heller, there was a case called Silvera versus Lockyer, which was a case that came out of California. This was a challenge to California's so-called assault weapon law coming out of California. It came out of the Ninth Circuit. Now, folks may not remember this because it was really not on most people's radar at the time. But before Heller, there was a case that came out of the Fifth Circuit, which was I believe the first federal appellate court ruling that held that the Second Amendment guaranteed. You want to at that red? You're going to make a right turn. That held that there was that the Second Amendment guaranteed an individual right to keep and bear arms, because up until then the federal courts were fairly uniform in their holding that the Second Amendment did not guarantee an individual right to keep and bear arms. So it was a big deal, and so the Ninth Circuit in the Silvera case came out with the exact opposite conclusion. Ninth Circuit basically felt that it was their mission to completely respond to and contradict what the Fifth Circuit had said, and so the lawyer handling that case out in California was filing a petition with the Supreme Court, what's called a cert petition, or a petition for certiorari, which is the way most cases these days reach the Supreme Court.
All right, let's talk about that real quick, because I hear people talking about, I don't even know the right terminology. It's been granted cert,
right? And
we hear this all the time, but I don't. What does that mean?
So the Supreme Court has a discretionary docket. They get to pick and choose which cases they want to hear. The Supreme Court gets an enormous number of requests to have their cases heard and reviewed, and they reject most of them because they simply can't hear all those cases. And so the terminology is the vehicle that gets a case to the Supreme Court is called a petition for certiorari, or a cert petition. And so when cert is granted, it means the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case. They've granted your petition for certiorari, now they're going to hear your case on the merits. So cert denied means they're not going to hear your case, and almost every petition is cert denied. That's typically how it works.
Right, and then that would mean that when it goes back to the lower court, whatever the lower court decided is what moves forward?
Generally, that's right, yeah. So if they deny cert, it means whatever the ruling was in the court below, that's the ruling. And that's the way it is.
Gotcha.
So this Silvera case coming out of the Ninth Circuit, there was a cert petition filed, and I don't remember exactly how I learned about this, but the JPFO, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, was soliciting people to write an amicus curiae brief. Amicus curiae is literally friend of the court. And amicus curiae briefs are frequently filed by interested parties. You're not the actual litigants, but you are some person or organization that has an interest in the outcome of the case. Because when you're dealing with the Supreme Court or another appellate court, but especially a Supreme Court, whether it's the United States Supreme Court or a state Supreme Court, the decision of that court is going to affect many, many people, not just the litigants in front of it. You know, when you're in the lower courts, typically the decision that a court makes is usually just going to govern those people. It can have effects on other people, but when you're at the Supreme Court or a Supreme Court, whether it's the New Jersey Supreme Court or any other Supreme Court, that decision is not going to just affect the people in front of it. It's going to affect everybody potentially, and so other people want to have their say, and they want to be in a position to educate the court on issues that the parties themselves might not be addressing. You know, the parties only have a limited ability to submit information, right? Your brief, there are limits on the size of your brief. There are limits on the time you have for argument.
If it's so big, how come they call it a brief?
Exactly. Right? So lots of parties may want to have something else to say. And a good example is the DC versus Heller case. There were 66 amicus curiae briefs submitted, which isn't even the record. It sounds like a lot of briefs, but that's not even close to the record.
Wow.
And, you know, people have, often, hopefully, there's something valuable to say. Sometimes people submit briefs that are just gobbledygook and annoying and ridiculous, but most of the time there's something useful. You have historians submitting historical information. You may have people submitting empirical data on crime or firearms usage, and I'm just giving you the Second Amendment context. You might have all sorts of things that could be useful for the court, and so JPFO wanted to submit an amicus curiae brief in the Silvera case to persuade the court to accept the petition. And they were looking for people to volunteer for that task. And so I thought to myself, well, that would be really interesting. The Second Amendment is something that was becoming more important to me. I was a gun owner at the time, and so I thought this is an important issue, and I think it would be really interesting to get involved. And so I sent a submission. I sent an email and said, here are my credentials, here's my background. And they chose me to lead a group of 3 attorneys to write an amicus curiae brief at the cert stage of the case, as opposed to the merits stage, which is if the case is accepted, then you could also submit an amicus curiae brief on the merits of the case. But this was simply at the cert stage to persuade the court to hear the case. So you can submit those kinds of briefs in various stages. That case was not taken. Which, as it turns out, was good, because it actually, in retrospect, it turned out to be a terrible vehicle for the court to hear the first Second Amendment case on the merits. So, but at the time, I was brand new to the subject matter, right. And so it was not obvious to me that it was actually a very bad vehicle for this. It's actually very important. Now that I do this for a living, and I've been doing it for many years, one of the things you learn is that it's actually extremely important that if you're going to bring an important issue of constitutional law or other law, really, to the Supreme Court, the actual case that you bring, the vehicle that brings the issue before the court, it's actually very important that it's the right vehicle for 2 reasons. Number one, the court is very picky about how it hears an issue. It should be framed in a way that the court finds appropriate for deciding the issue. So the vehicle, the case that you choose to bring to the court, will affect whether the court is interested in hearing it even. But also, you want to bring a kind of case that is likely to result in the right outcome. So it really matters how you bring a case to the Supreme Court. And the reason the Silvera case was not the right vehicle was because it was a quote-unquote assault weapon case. Something that, at the time, because you didn't want that to be the first case the Supreme Court hears. You want the first case that the Supreme Court hears to be something that's much more mild, much more ordinary. And so the Heller case turned out to be perfect for that. The Heller, the most important aspects of the Heller case, when you read it, is the idea that handguns are the most favored firearm that people use for personal defense in their homes,
right.
And that made it much more palatable and mainstream to recognize why people have a right to keep their arms and why that's worth enforcing. That vehicle was much better than the Silvera case, and so cert denied was fine, as it turns out.
Okay.
But these are the things you learn,
Sure.
But that was my first experience as an attorney involved in a Second Amendment issue. Then Heller came around, and if I recall correctly, I think I called Aaron Zellman, who was the founder of JPFO, and I think I said, you need to be in this case.
Right.
This is the case. And at that point, cert was already granted. The Supreme Court was going to hear Heller. It was the case, and everybody was very excited. Everybody wanted to be involved, and I said, this is important. This is the case, and you really want to be in this case. And and he agreed. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And so I submitted an amicus brief on the merits in Heller. I also submitted an amicus brief for JPFO in McDonald, and that really got things going. And I found that the issue was just extremely important. The Second Amendment, and people, firearms owners understand this intuitively for the most part. I think non-gun owners don't recognize this, but the Second Amendment is so fundamental to liberty. So many people think of the First Amendment as an essential provision of the Constitution that guarantees personal liberty, and it is. But the Second Amendment is also one of those extremely important principles of liberty, and they go hand in hand. And I think gun owners intuitively understand that and appreciate that. And when I discovered that this was a fertile area for development of human liberty and personal liberty, I thought it was very important to be involved, and I thought it was worthwhile. It's also fun. My background as a lawyer had been as a commercial lawyer. I'm a litigator. I've been doing commercial litigation for my career, for my entire career, and I still enjoy commercial litigation. I still do it. It's business litigation, a lot of real estate litigation. I was doing environmental litigation for a considerable period of time, which I still do, and that's interesting and fun. It involves unusual issues. It involves complex issues of business, business issues, financial issues. And I do it at a fairly high level of sophistication, and it's great, but it's fundamentally different than the civil rights litigation. So in addition to the Second Amendment work, I do First Amendment work, I do Fifth and 14th Amendment work. It's a very different animal. They both have their importance and their significance in the world and in life. And there's some overlap, which is kind of interesting. But the Second Amendment and other civil rights work is fun and interesting and intellectually challenging in a different way. And I love it, and it's great. So that's how. And eventually, I got involved very much in representing ANJRPC. I got involved with NRA. I have represented really most of the Second Amendment organizations from time to time. SAF, FPC, NFA Freedom Alliance, Knife Rights. I had a major case coming out of New York. We sued New York City and District Attorney Cyrus Vance over the New York gravity knife law, Knife Rights. So it has expanded greatly. I got involved in a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, all outstanding Second Amendment groups. My main efforts are still with ANJRPC and NRA, but I've gotten to know a broad group of people in the movement, and it's very gratifying. It's both interesting, important, and fun. So that's how I got involved.
That's cool. The gravity knife. I remember hearing you and Anthony talk about this on the Gun for Hire show. All right, and the gravity knife was one of these things where you can't have an assisted knife because that would be a switchblade. But if you flicked it out fast enough and it came out If the blade came out, then it was not okay to have.
Yeah, the gravity knife case was the gravity knife law, New York's gravity knife law, which has since been repealed through the efforts of knife rights. It was actually a very interesting, multi-pronged effort between the litigation and the legislative effort. The gravity knife, New York's gravity knife law was just lunacy. There are gravity knife laws in a variety of jurisdictions, but the way New York City applied it was that if you could flick the knife open with the flick of your wrist, they considered it a gravity knife. The problem with that is whether a person could flick the knife open. Well, it has nothing to do with whether you could flick the knife open. It had to do with whether anyone could flick the knife open. So you could have a knife for 15 years, be unable to flick it open with your wrist, and if a police officer encountered you on the street, saw your knife, took it and flicked it open, you were under arrest. And there was no way to protect yourself from that. No way to protect yourself from that.
So I had, when I first got into gun stuff, you hang out with gun guys, and it becomes, well, you have a gun? Yes, I have a gun. Do you have a knife? Yes, I have a knife. Actually, the first it was, no, I don't have a knife. They're like, well, you should carry a knife. And then you start carrying a knife and a gun, and then you run into these guys a few months later, and they're like, okay, where's your gun? Here's a gun. Where's your knife? Here's a knife. Where's your other knife?
Right.
You're like, holy crap, how many knives do I have to carry?
Well, at least two.
At least.
You don't carry two knives?
3.
Oh, okay, that's good. I'm not there yet, sorry. Not up to 3 yet, sorry.
I think I have, the third knife I carry is a riding shotgun with Charlie credit card knife. And I think I have one, which if I do, I'll give it to you. It's not TSA safe.
Right, well, that's
you might be able to bring it in court, but I'm pretty sure I could not.
You can't bring knives to court.
Okay.
Except in one situation. In the gravity knife case, so this is great. So in the gravity knife case, when we went to trial, we were in federal court in the Southern District of New York. We went to trial in the gravity knife case, and one important aspect of the case was a demonstration. Doug Ritter and I demonstrated demonstrated folding knives in court, in front of the federal judge.
Oh my God.
By attempting to flick knives. Doug would do one, I would do one, and the whole point of the demonstration was to show the variability. How one person could take the same exact knife, be unable to flick it open, and another person could flick it open. And that was the key to the whole thing. Because the idea that you could own a knife and not have any idea that it could be flicked open is exactly why you have no way of protecting yourself from prosecution. Right. And that's what made it void for vagueness in our view. Because if the 14th Amendment due process clause requires that you be able to determine what is lawful conduct and what is not lawful conduct. You have to be able to conform your conduct to the law. You have to know how to behave lawfully. Otherwise, you can be prosecuted for anything. And the idea was that the fact that you couldn't tell necessarily whether a given knife could one day be flicked open by any of 50,000 police officers on the NYPD made it impossible to know whether you had an illegal knife, and that was the claim. So Doug and I are in federal court, and we're flicking knives. And at one point, the judge said, "I'm going to ask the court reporter to move back here." And we were, and it was very illustrative. It might possibly be the only time anybody ever brought knives to actually use in federal court. Knives are usually just evidence alleged evidence of a crime. It's like, this is State's Exhibit A, or whatever. But we were actually flicking knives. And we actually at one point, because we brought in a true gravity knife, a true World War II German gravity knife, which folding knives are not gravity knives. I mean, notwithstanding what New York likes to say, they're not. So we actually invited the federal judge to try out what a true gravity knife was like, and she did. So it's probably the first federal judge to actually handle a knife in court like that.
That's cool. Well, my point with it was the first knife I started to carry was a Smith & Wesson knife, and it was like half of it was serrated, and it had a clip on it that you put on your pants and advertised to everyone that you're carrying a knife, which I don't carry those anymore, because my attitude is if he's got one knife, he's probably got two. You also can't do that in New York City. New York City requires concealed carry for knives. Assuming it's a legal knife, because New York has restrictions on what kind of knives you can possess, but in New York City, you can't have anything showing, not a clip, not the head of the knife. Wow. They will stop you, and they will take the knife and perhaps charge you for whatever. But if you're in New York City and you have a knife, assuming it's legal, it must be deep in your pocket,
nobody can see it.
Good.
That's important.
Okay.
So, sorry, I interrupted.
No, well, so the knife I had a screw on it, and you could adjust how well you could flick it open.
Right.
It had a little thing that on the back of the blade, I think it's the spine of the blade, where and it had one of those little assist knobs, and I was playing with it, and you loosen the screw up a little bit, and you can flick it out, and you can flick it out, and you can flick it out. So at one point when I first got it, it might not have been classified as a gravity knife, but by the time I got rid of it, I'm sure it could have, because it just got loose.
Even that doesn't help you, because that was one of the arguments that was involved in the case as well. If it's adjustable, you need to adjust it so that it can't be flicked open. Okay, so how tight do you have to adjust it so it can't be flicked open? Remember, it's the same problem.
Right.
How tight do you have to make it so that no one can flick it open? Not just you, but
right.
No police officer, no prosecutor. That's the same problem. You can tighten it up like crazy, but if someone can manage to flick it open, you get arrested.
Unbelievable.
So there's no way around it. It's impossible to protect yourself from prosecution in that situation. So what ultimately happened was our case was on a cert petition to the Supreme Court at the same time that the third bill that the legislature passed to repeal the law was on the governor's desk. So the legislature, Knife Rights had, in addition to the litigation, Knife Rights had been simultaneously trying to get legislation passed. Todd Rathner was very heavily involved in that, trying to get the legislature to pass a reform bill that would eliminate this problem. 3 times the legislature in New York passed the bill. Overwhelmingly, I think the third time was literally unanimous. I think the second time around it was almost unanimous. And Cuomo vetoed it twice. The third time, it was on his desk. We had our cert petition, and pending in the Supreme Court. It was like a multi-pronged thing. Yeah. He finally signed it after all that effort. So, a ton of effort to try to get that done. But anyways, it was crazy. So
that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It's ridiculous that it could be that things could be that arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, this is the stuff that we fight against. I mean, this is the kind of arbitrary or intentional, aggressive government action that these cases are designed to push against. Whether it's the really aggressive stuff in New Jersey, or simpler things that are just sort of basic infringements.
Yeah.
It's critical that this movement, both political, social, legal, is incredibly important to push back on these infringements of liberty. This country, we're spoiled in this country because, to the right, we're spoiled in this country because the liberty that we enjoy here, so many people don't realize that other countries are nothing like this country when it comes to liberty. People are used to thinking, well, there's Western countries, there's Britain, there's France, there's Italy, there's Germany. They're just like us. Yeah. They're not just like us. And this hit home acutely when I was watching. I don't know if you remember the Amanda Knox case from years ago in Italy. She was an American who was in Italy, and she was being prosecuted. I think it was for the murder of her roommate or something like that. She was being prosecuted. It was in the news, and what I learned was that in Italy, it's a crime to criticize a prosecutor. Could you imagine? What? Could you imagine in this country if you could be arrested and charged with a crime merely for speaking out against a prosecutor?
Wow!
It's a crime in Italy to criticize a prosecutor, and in Great Britain, the law allows all sorts of government censorship that would never even get off, out of the gate in this country. People don't understand, and I think that people need to appreciate this because they don't understand that this country is unique in terms of the intense and rigorous tradition of liberty that we enjoy here, which is why it is so important to defend liberty, to protect liberty, to fight in defense of the freedom that we have every inch of the way, because it isn't like that anywhere else in the world.
Right.
Even the most Western of Western countries in Europe or wherever else, they're just not the same as us as far as our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and the rights that we have. And that's why this is so important on every front. Gun owners are. And gun owners, I think, understand it intuitively. I think gun owners generally understand these important concepts of liberty and how vital it is, which is what makes gun owners this very unusual, intense movement and block. A lot of people who are not gun owners don't understand the strength of the gun owner movement and the gun rights movement. I think they don't understand. They think it's about money. They think it's about, influence, political contributions. It's not. It's about the people in the movement. It's about gun owners, and even some non-gun owners in the U.S. who cherish the liberty that is our heritage and who understand its importance. And gun owners are possibly, and I haven't done a quantitative review of this, gun owners almost certainly are among the most cohesive bloc that we have in this country, because people understand the intensity and the significance of the liberty interest involved in firearms ownership in the Second Amendment. So it's critically important. People get it in the gun rights movement. People get it, hopefully understand it and get it outside the gun rights movement. It's a lot of fun to be part of that. It's very gratifying to be part of that effort. And there's the victories, there's setbacks, there's all kinds of stuff. This is, as we like to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
But every step forward is exciting, and it's a recognition of how people can, as a movement, protect human liberty.
This is what I find kind of interesting. I don't think people realize. I don't think people realize it until they get a gun license and buy a gun and get involved and wake up to all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't a gun guy. I didn't grow up hunting or shooting or anything like this. But then when I got involved, I'm like, this is really cool. And then you get into it a little bit more. You get a couple of, get some magazines, take a couple of classes, read a couple books, and you're like, holy moly, this is really serious stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think the anti-gun folks realize how serious it is.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. And the anti-gun folks, I think it's important for people to recognize that the quote-unquote anti-gun folks, they span a very broad spectrum of where they come from. I mean, sort of their background and their understanding and their mindset. Mm-hmm. There are, of course, the people that are aggressively hostile to firearms rights and liberty, either because politically that's just their nature, because they want to be oppressive, or because they're just contemptuous of freedom. There's those people. Mm-hmm. There are other people that are just fundamentally ignorant about firearms, their nature, and what they mean in society, right? I mean, you have your people who've never touched a firearm, don't know anything about them, and they are easily misled by rhetoric, from politicians or anti-gun groups. They show pictures of. Here's a good example. When the Smart Gun Bill all those years ago was being advanced in the New Jersey legislature, the anti-gun groups would advertise, and they would have a picture of a young child, and they would talk about, they superimposed a false statistic about the number of children, killed or injured by firearms. But the issue that supposedly the Smart Gun Bill was supposed to address, which it doesn't, was the idea of accidents in the home. Young children opening up their parents' sock drawer and there's a loaded gun there, and they injure themselves or kill themselves or a friend. The problem is that they juxtapose a completely incorrect statistic. It turns out that the specific problem of the young child going into the sock drawer is virtually non-existent. It's a terrible thing when it happens.
Sure.
It's a terrible thing. It's awful, of course. But it's extremely rare as well. And to take that horrible situation and pretend and lie to people about its frequency as if it's a very common thing.
Right.
Well, okay, the people behind such an ad are awful and evil. They're just liars. The problem is people who are not familiar with the actual facts, they see that and they think to themselves, well, that's terrible. We have to do something about that. And they could be of entirely goodwill.
Right.
They just don't know. And so there's so many people like that, which is why education and why outreach in many forms the kind of outreach that Anthony Colandro does on his show Gun for Hire Radio, the kind of outreach the various gun rights organizations do, NRA, SAF, all of them, is so important, even to the extent of, something that I have done in the past, I know a lot of people do, is they bring a friend to the range.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? I mean, that's something that a lot of people do. It's so valuable just to get people to understand what firearms ownership is about, what it is and what it isn't. I can tell you how many people friends I've brought to the range who never fired a gun, who were basically anti-gun, not necessarily virulently anti-gun, but nominally anti-gun. I've brought them to the range. They've gone shooting. They had a lot of fun. I had a friend of mine. I said, you know what? I don't know if I'll do it again, and I'm not about to join the NRA, but yeah, that was fun. Thanks for bringing me.
That's a victory.
It is. And it really is. It is. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that. I know tons of people do that. And
of course.
And the outreach and the education and just letting people who are totally unfamiliar with it understand what it really is helps combat the lies and the falsehoods that are pervasive, both from the political folks and just the media, the organizations, the anti-gunners, in every stripe. That is a tremendous effort that's very important, that can be very valuable in this effort.
It is. It really is important to take someone out that's never gone shooting before and go through the safety stuff and the loading and unloading and give them one round and have them shoot one round, and to see the light go off and have them be like, oh, this isn't what I thought.
Yeah.
The guns didn't pick themselves up and start shooting everyone.
Right.
I didn't hurt myself. It's not as loud as I thought it was, and it was probably pretty fun, and I enjoyed myself. And maybe it's not for me, but I'm more knowledgeable about it after having gone to that.
Yeah, and it's tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendously valuable and very effective, in getting people to understand.
Yeah.
Because understanding the other, quote unquote, other side is so important. People, one of the problems today that we deal with constantly, and social media doesn't help here. In fact, social media amplifies the problem, is people's reduced ability to talk to each other.
Oh, yeah.
And we see all the time how people have become much more polarized. It is much more us versus them. People are losing the ability to talk. They're losing the ability to talk to their neighbors. They're losing the ability to talk to their friends.
Oh my gosh.
They're losing the ability to just talk to the other guy. and that's, that being able to communicate and convey basic information and be able to understand the other person is so important, because fundamentally, us versus them is not left versus right, red versus blue. Us versus them is people versus the politicians. Politicians, whether they're blue or red, have much more in common with each other than regular folks.
Absolutely.
So regular folks need to talk to each other and understand each other and be able to converse about topics that they may disagree with, whether it's guns or anything else.
Yeah.
That's the key to the whole thing.
That's awesome. Speaking of talking to people, my kids, my daughter's 18, my son's 20, telling them to call to make an appointment to get an oil change.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
What do I do? You call them and say you need an oil change. What do I say? Hi, I need an oil change.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's not that difficult.
I know.
Here's what you do. You call, you tell them you need an oil change.
Kids today.
Oh my gosh. My son.
Today.
Really? I mean, I bought a computer for my son last fall, and it came in I had it delivered to him at college, and it came in on a Friday afternoon. It was like a 2 to 4 was the time window it was going to be delivered. The mailroom closed at 4:30. I'm like, look, go down, let him see your face, and just be like, hi, I'm Charlie's son. I'm expecting something from Amazon. It's a computer. If you guys, when you see it, could you, I just want to let you know I'm looking for it. Well, when it comes in, they're going to let me know. If they see your face and know you're not a jerk, when it comes in, they'll be like, oh, hey, that guy came by. He's expecting it. He didn't go pick it up until Tuesday. Dude, you could have had it Friday afternoon. Well, they're just going to deliver it. No, they're not going to. If they can put a face with it and put a human to it, it's going to be easier. I'm not going to go talk to them. Okay. Just wait.
We're doomed.
I know we are, aren't we? These are my old kids.
Yeah, I know. It's like I love those commercials about becoming your parents.
Oh my god!
Because we do become our parents. This is so funny. It's like these kids,
Right.
kids today.
You open up your mouth and your parents come
What's
out.
that music you're listening to? You know, it's great. It's great. You know what? They will survive. They will survive and they will thrive. It's just it's so foreign to, each generation is so foreign to the one before it. It's funny.
Yeah, that's crazy. What other kind of stuff do you have going on that you can talk about?
Well, we have we've been actually fairly busy. We were actually fairly busy during the pandemic. We had here in New Jersey. New Jersey was one of the places that shut down.
Everything was shut
down FFLs.
Yeah.
And gun ranges. And so we pushed back on all of that stuff. We sued the governor early in the shutdowns to open up FFLs.
Governor free stuff.
Yeah, and we filed a case called ANJRPC, Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs versus Murphy. The governor backed off a few days later. Opened up FFLs. Then I want to say it was in May, roughly. I'm just trying to remember back to last year. Right around May, when outdoor activities were starting to open up, he was opening up, I believe, tennis courts and golf courses and parks, but not outdoor ranges. We sued him again. Again, he backed off and opened up outdoor ranges. Then I think it was June when indoor facilities were starting to open up. Tattoo parlors, hair salons, massage parlors, nail salons. I mean, these are places with very close contact, physical contact with the customers. Would not open up indoor ranges. We sued him again. He backed off again and opened up indoor ranges. So we were actually quite busy on that front. It was, again, I've talked about this sort of broadly, but that stuff is very important. And that was during the early part of the pandemic when the Supreme Court was not rigorously supporting fundamental constitutional rights in the face of arbitrary authority that was being exercised by executives all over the country. The pandemic presented and presents a very, very serious challenge. Right up there, the light. A very serious challenge to the principles of liberty under the Constitution as we know it here. This is unprecedented. What happened and the type of authority that was being exercised all over the country, especially in places like New Jersey, but everywhere really, was literally unprecedented. We've never seen this kind of arbitrary authority being exercised by an executive in the past, in the history of the country. And it had enormous implications for constitutional liberty and what the principles, what constitutional principles courts are going to be willing to enforce in an emergency. As you know, I'm sure, and as your audience knows, the best time to clamp down on personal liberty is during an emergency.
Oh my God!
Right? Yeah. That's always when government authorities will take advantage of fear. If you are afraid, the people can take advantage of you. If you are afraid, then the government has the best opportunity to impose constraints on liberty and get away with it, because people are much more likely to accept those constraints, and you often don't get them back. That's the problem. Emergency provisions are often permanent. Not always, but frequently enough that it's dangerous. So in a pandemic like this, when you see these sweeping executive decrees, is what they are. The executive orders are just unilateral decrees by an executive. These aren't legislative acts. They may derive from legislative acts to the extent that the legislature passes a statute that gives the governor these kinds of authorities, but the actual acts themselves are really shocking in their extent and nature and their sweeping scope. And so pushing back on that is incredibly important. And prior to the appointment of Justice Barrett last year, the Supreme Court seemed to show an unwillingness to intervene and to do that. In the Nevada Calvary Church case, where there was religious liberty, First Amendment religious liberty at stake, the Supreme Court would not intervene to address what was allegedly an infringement on the free exercise clause under the First Amendment. Well, that changed when the balance of the Supreme Court shifted when Justice Barrett was appointed. You had another religious liberty case that came out of the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit is the Court of Appeals, the Federal Court of Appeals that covers New York and Vermont, Connecticut. And in that case, that was the Roman Catholic Diocese case that came out of New York. And in that case, the Supreme Court showed a willingness to put a stop to what appeared to be arbitrary power that was to the disadvantage of fundamental constitutional rights. That was really a seismic shift in how the courts and how our society was willing to look at what can and can be done in an emergency like a viral pandemic. Like, what can you do? What's appropriate? Because, again, in other countries, it's just not an issue. In other countries, governments do what they want, even in Western countries. Wow. Here, people say, well, wait a minute. No, right? I mean, yes, it's an emergency, there are risks and there are problems, but this is the United States. We have rights, we have a constitution. You can't just do whatever you want. There are limits, there are real limits, and we have a constitution that identifies what those limits are. Right. And so the Roman Catholic Diocese case was tremendously important in demonstrating that those limits on arbitrary government authority, even in an emergency, are going to be recognized. And so the reason I raise this is because the stuff that we were doing early on in the pandemic was before the Roman Catholic Diocese case. So we were litigating against the governor in the Calvary Church world, where it wasn't clear what the courts were willing to do, but we had to push back anyway. Right. We had to go there and push hard in defense of not just the Second Amendment, but liberty generally. So it was very gratifying to be one of those fronts where people who cherish liberty were willing to push back on what was clearly arbitrary government authority. So there's a really important lesson to be learned during COVID. And I have to say, there are people with all sorts of opinions about this. There are people who have all sorts of opinions about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what the government should do, what the government should not do. Yeah. The one thing that we've seen, which I think is very encouraging, is that many people have not lost their visceral sense of what it means to be a free individual and what that means even in the context of emergency conditions. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily tell you one way or the other is like what's the right policy, what choices people should make for themselves and their families and their community, but there is a clear undercurrent of liberty that people retain and people remember. It's very gratifying, I have to say. It's encouraging to see that.
That's cool, man. You guys really do kick-ass work.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of us out there.
There is.
I mean, it's not. There are a lot of very high quality lawyers doing this stuff out there. It's my pleasure to work with many of them. I do some of this stuff on my own, but I do a lot of it with in conjunction with other lawyers who are just outstanding.
Rock stars.
And it's not just the lawyers, because there's the political side of things. There's so much. There's the grassroots side of things.
Yeah.
It's all part of a single effort, and it's very important. Each piece of it, in court, in the legislature, in the rallies, out on the street, with signs, with speeches, whatever. All of that stuff is extremely important. Writing to, just simply writing to your legislature, just simply supporting your Second Amendment rights organizations. It's all part of the effort, and it's because just suing in court by itself doesn't. It's a critical part of the whole thing, and it can be very effective. But by itself, it's not the whole thing. I know that I'm sure other my colleagues would agree with me. Other lawyers who do this stuff would agree that the entire thing is the picture. You need the whole thing to make it work. So this will get you back into the world. And it's very exciting to see the energy. I don't know that I've seen true visceral energy like this from other movements. I mean, you see people out rallying, carrying signs, marching, and I'm sure. And look, I'm sure there's plenty of energy out there in those groups. I don't know that I've actually seen this kind of energy from in other movements than what's in the gun rights movement that we see every day. So it's exciting to see that level of commitment from people.
That's
everybody.
Cool.
It's great. It's really great.
Cool. All right, we are almost where we need to be.
Okay.
So how can people find you? I will put links to
when I'm editing the show, I'll put some links to all the groups you mentioned, JFPFO and the Knife Rights and
ANJRPC. Well, my firm, I practice in New Jersey and New York, as you mentioned. My firm is called Hartman and Winnicki. We're in Ridgewood, New Jersey. That's where our main office is. And we do. I think I told you the civil rights stuff came afterwards. We are a small firm, but we're a general practice firm. We do general commercial work. We do personal work. Do a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff, estate planning, wills, things like that. We do
regular stuff.
Regular stuff. We do commercial law. We do leases for small and large businesses. We do commercial transactions for small and large businesses. So we do all of that stuff at a very high level. We do very high. When I say high level, I mean very high quality. What's nice about my firm and my partners is that we do all that stuff, but we do it in a very very high level of expectation. The lawyers at my firm we expect excellence from each other, and we expect to provide clients with an excellent level of work and service, regardless of whether it's commercial work, personal work, civil rights work. So my website is www.hartmanwinnicki.com, HARTMAN WINNICKI.com.
I was going to have to check Winnicki.
I'll just give you a ridiculous story. So our website is, and our email, our domain name is hartmanwinnicki.com, and I have to spell that for people if on the phone. Do you know that years ago we had a domain hwlaw.net? Simplest thing in the world. We gave that up for some crazy reason. We had hartmanwinnicki.com as well, but the HWLaw.net was great. We gave that up. So now I have to spell that out for people.
Man, when I started my show, I'm like, I'm going to call it Writing Shotgun with Charlie. What should the website be? WritingShotgunWithCharlie.com. People are like, well, that's a lot of it's a lot of letters. It's a lot of words. I'm like, I don't know what else to call it.
But it's really easy. I mean, writing shot. I mean, come on. But we have to spell. We have to spell. I mean, no offense to my partner Darius Winnicki, who's a great lawyer.
He doesn't have his.
He's a great lawyer, and he heads up our firm, and he's fantastic. But having to spell the name, every time I want to give somebody my email address, it's like, come on. It's got to be a better way to do it.
No kidding. No kidding. Yeah. Cool. Listen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Charlie,
I greatly appreciate this.
Thanks for asking me to do it. This was great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
If you want to support the show and get some Writing Shotgun with Charlie stickers and patches, which I'm going to give to you. You can add these to your gun cases, and if you got one of those patch guys.
Yeah, definitely love the trumpet one. It's tremendous. That is outstanding.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I had the story with that is I started making these videos, and they've been watched 20 million times all over the world. And I had someone message me, and they're like, "Hey, I've got a friend that makes digital cartoon characters. Can he make one of you?" Yeah. He's like, if he does this, would you make it the avatar for your YouTube channel? Yeah, sure. Why not? What the hell? And then I'm like, you know what? I got to make merch. I gotta sell stuff. So Anthony was the one. I went and was traveling through Jersey, messaged Anthony. I said, hey, let's get together and talk. And he's like, hey, you should sell some stickers.
You should wrap your car with this.
So I live in Massachusetts.
They wouldn't appreciate that there? What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about.
I think my insurance rate would go up after the windows get broken a couple of times. And this is really bad. I don't even have I have a Writing Shotgun sticker on my car. I don't have a Gungram sticker on my car. So I feel very hypocritical about that.
See?
But anyway, so Anthony's like, we're talking. He's like, you should make some stickers and sell them and give them away or whatever. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're not going to do it, are you? I'm like, I am. And I had to go home. I'm like, okay. Anthony said, you're not going to do it. You have to do it. So.
And Anthony is always right.
He is. He is. Have you seen his new book, Crime Proof?
I have it on order. I'm gonna get one of the autographed copies. I pre-ordered it. It looks like an outstanding book.
I will say this. I may have read it, and it's great. It's great for anybody of any age.
It may be one of those books I'm going to want to give away as gifts, actually.
I thought, I'm like, do I have them autograph a couple books for my kids?
Yeah.
My kids probably won't appreciate it, but it'll be good for them to go back and reference.
Yeah.
So it's a cool book.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, thank you guys for watching the show. Please check out Writing Shotgun on YouTube, on Gunstreamer, on the OpsLens app. You can listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio. Please join the Second Amendment Foundation, SAF.org, and their sister organization, the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, the CCRBKA. You can check out all of your favorite pro-freedom podcasts on the Self-Defense Radio Network, which is sdrn.us. And thank you for watching the show. If you enjoyed it, please share it with some of your friends. We are trying to take the Stagecoach across America. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie.
We'll see you next time.